Hi, I'm Anna. Welcome back to Books on the Go. I'm here with a wrap up of the books I've been reading recently. So this would be May, and let's face it, we're into June, well into June now. And you might recall I was nearly at the end of reading my TBR. So very exciting. I've now finished. So running through the last 3 books that were on my TBR. History's Angel by Anjum Hasan. And this was really fun. I enjoyed it. It was set in Delhi, and the main character is a hapless teacher who's about to lose his job or under threat of losing his job. His wife is a real go-getter businesswoman, and it looks at the changing dynamics of Indian society and the capitalism, the impact of capitalism and his relationships. It's not a fast-moving plot, but I really enjoyed being in his company. He was a really interesting character. I liked the tone, the sort of dry wit or the satirical tone, but also very compassionate, and so I recommend it. That's History's Angel by Anjum Hasan. The other one that I read, that I bought these at the same time, Pyre by Perumal Murugan. Both of these authors were at Adelaide Writers' Week, so that's what caught my eye. That's how I found these books, and this one didn't work as well for me, but that's because I think the style is just not something I generally get on with, which is a fairy tale tone, which is to say it's told a bit remotely as if you're telling a fairy tale, so it doesn't feel so real. And it's about a young couple who get married and move to his village, remote village, and both of their families are unhappy with the marriage because she's from a different caste to him, and in the village the villagers make them feel very unwelcome, and indeed it's quite brutal. And I found this quite disturbing. It's disturbing on a number of levels. It is meant to be disturbing about the caste system and just the provincial villagers who have a lot of inbuilt prejudices about that and just have built up a way of life that really depends on it, and it's very disturbing to them when they're confronted with this couple. But also I found him a bit coercive, controlling, because he doesn't let her go home when she says, I'd actually like to go back to my family. He won't let her. And it's meant to be this lovey-dovey couple where he's completely there for her, and he's the only person who is there for her because no one else in the village accepts her. So I actually found that distressing and not fun to read. And the whole tone, there's not really a lighter moment in the book, or there's no light and shade as far as, in my reading of it. It was all one tone and quite depressing, really, even though I think you're meant to find their love really a joyful part of it, but I didn't get that. So that was Pyre. It didn't work as well for me, but it is really beautifully written, but that's just not the one for me. The Swan book by Alexis Wright, I really loved. So this one I'd had on my shelf for a long time, and Alexis Wright is an iconic Australian Indigenous author. And the Swan book is about a young girl who doesn't speak. She grows up in a remote community in the north of Australia and has had a traumatic past, and the government has intervened in that community and tried to, do what they think is the right thing, but which might in fact not be the right thing, and is almost, it's like sending the army in, which is based on real events that have happened in Australia. And so you have the interplay between the government and then the local community and how they get along or don't get along. And then this so-called saviour, or this boy who's been groomed since childhood to become the sort of leader of Australia and becomes the first Aboriginal Prime Minister of Australia. And he marries this girl, so she becomes the first wife. But it's not all fairy tales at all. And this was just really beautifully written. Alexis Wright has such an innovative and playful use of language, but also tackling serious subjects. But just the writing is such a joy, and it's infused with words from different cultures and languages, and the whole sense of Indigenous spiritual beliefs and culture. So that's just infused throughout the novel. So in the sense that it makes you see things differently, and it's just wonderful. I really recommend it. And that is, it's got mythical elements which normally would put me off, but because she does it so confidently and because it is so true to the characters and the beliefs that they hold, it just makes sense and it works for this book. So Alexis Wright is the author of Praiseworthy. That's her latest novel, which just won the Stella Prize for women's writing in Australia. So that one I haven't yet read, and it's Annie tells me it's about 800 pages. So we're bracing ourselves, but we're really keen to read that one as well. But anyway, the Swan book, I'm still catching up with Alexis Wright's work, but this one was really wonderful. So I recommend it. It's really rich and rewarding. That was the end of my TBR. So of course, what did I read next? I went and did a shopping spree, Lies and Weddings by Kwan, because I just did feel like a light palette cleanser. The Swan book is one of those books that you have a book hangover from. So Lies and Weddings, it's everything you want it to be. If you enjoyed Crazy Rich Asians, it's more over the top. It's more ridiculous and outrageous, but really fun. We go to the UK, Marrakesh, Hollywood. We have all the characters. You do enjoy spending time with the couple of main characters, and then there are some really unlikable characters and some most ridiculous events, and I think it's hard for him to outdo himself now, because he's taken the idea of what do you do if you have so much money and you just spending it, what do people do with that? And he's almost taken it to the extreme at this point, but so much fun. I'd love to see it on screen, and that just kept me entertained for a couple of days. Lies and Weddings, if you feel like an escapist read. Then I got Highly Desirable, Tales of London's Super Prime Property from The Secret Agent, and he's a real estate agent in London who has been writing a column in the Financial Times and the Times under the pseudonym Secret Agent, and it's a bit like a collection. It's done as a diary over a calendar year, and just vignettes from a day in the life of, and it's his office, which I really enjoyed. He's a great writer. You get a bit of an insight into the market and how that real estate market works at that level, that sort of 1% level. And some of his clients are Oscar winners or national treasures in Britain, or there's a billionaire, and you get a smattering of the different types of clients that he would deal with. And then his office, you come to think of them as family. So there are 4 of them altogether and this might be sort of partly invented characters. I don't think he does say he's had to obscure the real people for privacy reasons. So I don't know how much of it is actually true, but it did feel like it was certainly taken from real life. And so I really enjoyed it. He's a great writer, and you get to know him a little bit, and you get to know how that market works, which I find quite interesting. So Highly Desirable, that was fun. And then a crime read, Listen for the Lie by Amy Tintera, which I saw recommended on Geordie's book club, and I think others had recommended it and on Instagram, and that's how I'd heard of it. And this was really fun. It's a woman who was suspected of killing her friend 5 years earlier, but she had amnesia. She doesn't remember what happened, but she's worried that she did do it. And she has to go back to her hometown where the events happened because to see her grandmother. And then a man called Ben, is making a podcast all about her case. And so he's sort of her nemesis, if you like, because he's known to be sometimes unscrupulous, but has solved true crime cases in the past. And she's kind of intrigued to see if he can solve it, because she just wants to know what happened, but also he's a bit of an enemy. And then there's, the other characters involved. So her friends and family, her dysfunctional parents and family back in the hometown. So it's got the small town vibes. She's quite a snarky character, or a cynical character, which at first put me off a bit, because I thought, how are we meant to sympathise with her when she's quite off-putting? But then I grew to really enjoy her company. So I think it's very well done. It's sharp, it's tightly written, well edited. Amy Tintera, I think, had a screenwriting background, which I think shows through, because there's a sense of a scene, and you know where you are, and then it cuts off and you move to the next scene, and it makes it really pacey. So Listen for the Lie, I can recommend. There's some twists and turns, and it's good fun. And then by contrast, unfortunately, another Geordie's Book Club recommendation, but I think he agrees with me on this one in the end, The Main Character by Jaclyn Goldis, which has all the premise that I want in a novel, including the cover, and that is an author interviews real people to get ideas for characters for her crime novels, and then she gets all of their life story and then uses it in her books. And she has a woman that she's used in this way and sends her on a holiday on the Orient Express, travelling down the Italian Riviera. What more could you want? A novel set in a train, murder mystery, Orient Express, Italy. I'm there, and it sounded perfect. And even though the setup sounds a bit contrived, I thought this sounds really fun. Unfortunately for me, the writing was a bit verbose and overwrought, and that was strange to me because she so overtly references Agatha Christie. And of course, one of the things we love about Agatha Christie is she has such a light touch, and her books are, even when she has quite complex characters, she just sketches them so deftly and lightly that you know, they're a breeze to read, and that's why people keep going back to them, and that's why we take them on holidays, and that's why, you know, she was so successful, because they were really cleanly written. This is not that at all. It felt sort of a bit heavier going and very over dramatic, over emotional, spelling everything out, lots of adjectives, and it just didn't work for me, that style. There wasn't a murder that I could find as far as I got. Then I bailed, so there might be that a death does happen. But she goes on the train. All of her people in her life are on the same train, and she wants to know why they're there. But it just, didn't work for me, so I bailed on this one. But I love this cover, so I really wanted it to work. And then opposite type of cover, really ugly, terrible cover, Death in the Clouds by Agatha Christie. I thought, since I, had been tempted by or wooed by this Agatha Christie reference, I'd go back to the original. This is one I had not read, and I really loved it. It was fun. It's set in a plane between Paris and London, or Paris and Croydon, I think it was, but in 1935. So it took me a while to get my head around the configuration, because it almost sounded like a private jet style, people sitting opposite each other, or I couldn't work it out, but there weren't that many seats in this part of the aeroplane, and it sounded quite luxurious and delightful, but sadly there was a murder, and it just has all the intrigue. It's quite straightforward in the sense that Poirot is there, and then he goes and speaks to each of the witnesses in turn. So it's a classic murder mystery in that sense, and not a major twist like some of Agatha Christie's work, but I found it thoroughly fun. There's a really good sense of humour in this book, and there's really fun banter between Poirot and Inspector Japp, and just all the things that you want. And it was just that contrast with the previous book that made me remember how good Agatha Christie was. So that won't be news to anybody, but they're the books I've been reading lately. I'd love to hear what you've been reading, and I will see you soon. Bye for now.